Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Three Doors Down brings its 20th anniversary tour to MECU Pavilion in Baltimore on August 20th. I spoke with frontman Brad Arnold about the band's biggest hits, from Kryptonite to Here Without You.
What's up, Jason?
Hey, Bradley, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
My absolute pleasure, man.
And we're talking for the 20th anniversary tour of The Better Life. Man, can you believe it's been 20 years?
You know what, man? I can't believe it's been 20 years. And when that record came out, I just turned 21 and started touring and been on tour for half my life now. And so, man, you know, to look back in some aspects, it's like, yeah, that seems like 20 years worth of stuff. But when you think about into little individual events, you're like, that's been 20 years ago. And I mean, you know, it is by the grace of God that we've been doing this for this long. And I mean, if you'd have asked me, would we still be going? I would have hoped so. But I mean, that would have been a really optimistic dream.
Right, for sure. Well, I want to get into, it is the 20th anniversary of A Better Life, so I want to get to that in a second, but let me back up a second and move a little more chronologically. Like, you grew up in like Mississippi, right? How did you actually get into music? You know what I mean? Like, what were the group bands you listened to growing up? And, you know, how did you actually get an instrument in your hand the first time?
Well, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And so I grew up kind of listening to whatever my brothers and sisters listened to. So I grew up listening and my dad as well. And my dad listened to everything like Marty Robbins and Charlie Pride. To my older brothers listened from Boston and Kansas. And then my sister, who I was a little closer to in age, she loved Bon Jovi and Poison and all the 80s bands. And so, man, I just kind of like, and along with that, I had another brother that listened to a bunch of country music. So I grew up with all the country music from the time. And man, I kind of ran the gambit. I had the influence from a lot of different stuff. And it was just kind of whatever my brothers and sisters listened to. And I grew up in the Assembly of God church, and that's almost like a Pentecostal or whatever. So, you know, you sing a lot in church, in Assembly of God church. And I didn't really sing in front of the church too much, but in those churches, everybody sings. And so I guess there I found my voice, and I never had to be, all of my family is kind of loud. And so I never really had to be bashful around my house and things like that. And so, and as far as like instruments, I can never remember not beating on pots and pans. And I have a picture from when I was, the drum that I was hitting would have been waist high to a 6th grader, because it was my brother's drum that he was playing in elementary school, and I'm reaching up over the top of it, beating it. And I was probably 2 years old. And I always liked making racket.
That's the original demo tape. It was called Pots and Pans.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you've told this story a million times, but how did the actual Three Doors Down band come together, and how did you guys come up with that name? I mean, I know the story, but tell our listeners.
Yeah, well, you know what? We came up with a name the day before a gig, and we really didn't have a name. And we were riding down through Fraley, Alabama on our way down to Gulf Shores. And that little town has a ton of fruit stands through it. And some of them are in the same little building. We'll have several. And one had moved a couple parcels down, and they had put a sign up on the front of their little booth there that said, you know, business moved so many doors down. And some of the letters had fallen off. And there was 3 of us at the time. And Todd said, you know, well, what about 3 doors down? And it stuck. And we just stuck with it, you know. And you know, but those 2 guys, Matt and Todd, I never remember not knowing them. I played T-ball with Matt. He's like my third cousin. And Todd, he dated my sister when he was in like middle school, and I was a little kid. And so I mean, I knew those guys from you know, my entire life. It's just one of those people you just don't remember not knowing them. And that really added to a lot of getting to start a band with 2 guys that I knew. And Chris came. I'd known Chris throughout my entire teenage years and stuff, through Todd, and he had played in the band together. But you know, it was such a pleasure not to just get to do it, but to get to do it with like real friends that I had known my whole life, not somebody that I was kind of having to learn to live with. And it made it it made it a lot sweeter in those first years.
Absolutely. All right. So then you know, The Better Life, you put together that breakthrough debut album, And man, that sucker is like, I don't know, 5 times platinum or something. It's insane. Tell me about the creation of Kryptonite, because that song, that's going to outlive me, you. They'll still be playing that song.
That song, I think it's like I think it's like a lot of catchy songs. They're the easiest ones to write because they already live, And I've always said that, man, I can't sit down and write a song. Occasionally one will just fall out of the sky and hit me in the mouth, and that's kind of what that one did. I sat down and I wrote it down. I mean, I was in high school algebra at the time. I was 16, 17. I might have been almost 17. I think I was still 16 at the time, and like I said earlier, I can't tell you how many times in my life I've been told to stop beating on that. And I was sitting there tapping on my desk, and that's where the little drum beat come from. That in the beginning of the song, and I just wrote the lyrics down, and I think the lyrics probably have more meaning for me now than they did then. But the general meaning of the song is just basically the question of, will you be there for me unconditionally, whether I'm up or whether I'm down? And that very question meant a lot to me throughout the years. But at the time, it was a pretty simple question. But it was just right about my friends, and I wrote those words down, man, and about the speed of time or length of time and speed that it would just take you to write down a thought, And I took it to practice that day and sang it through to Matt one time, and I said, "Think you got something for that?" And he played the first notes of that song, and it really, honestly, man, it never changed a whole lot. And it was just it's just how it came about. It was really, really easy, but it was one of those songs also when, as soon as we wrote it, we were like, that's a pretty dang good song right there, man. And I mean, and that being that we had only probably ever wrote 4 or 5 songs, or maybe 7 or 8 songs ever before we wrote Kryptonite.
Wow. So Kryptonite was written in high school algebra class. There you go.
It was.
That's insane.
I'm terrible.
That's not bad for right out of the gate, man. Well, I mean, we're talking the Better Life anniversary tour. So, of course, that album also had Loser, which is a completely different sort of vibe than Kryptonite. This one's a little heavier theme, but tell me about what you was going through your mind when you penned that. That one's that's a little darker.
Yeah, that was a little darker. And it was actually about one of my friends. And I wasn't calling him a loser. It was actually how I thought that he viewed himself. Because it was another kid that grew up with me and Matt, and he's fine now. But at the time, he's going through a rough spot in his life with some drugs. And I think that we were teenagers in a small town, and we were really bored. And I think everybody tried this and that. But he got a little off in it. And it's just how I thought that he viewed himself through the veil that those had kind of put over his eyes. And like I said, I'm thankful to say that he's straightened up and he's fine. But it was, I think but the same thing, at the same time, I think we were all kind of going through that same mentality of, I don't know, when you're young like that, and you bunch of rambunctious boys, and there's a certain amount of inevitability you think of something happening or whatever. I don't think any young man sees himself living to be an old man, I guess. And right. I think maybe that's just kind of the theme of that song.
I mean, great. I didn't know that. It seemed like it might have been a personal story, but you're saying you wrote it about what you thought someone else was doing. That's great. And then, of course, wrapping it up, we're talking the Better Life tour. The other big hit off that was Be Like That. Was that, I mean, that's just like a beautiful little song, but was that based on someone that you wish you could be like, did you look up to somebody, or, what's the story behind that?
You know what? It was kind of me. It was kind of my thoughts. Because the way that we got signed is we made a demo down in Mississippi, and about half the songs our local radio station started playing Kryptonite. It became a really highly requested song on the station, and we got signed for. So about half of that demo became the Better Life record. And then we wrote the other 5 songs. And one of those songs was Be Like That. And at the time we were getting signed. So we knew that we were getting signed. And that song was just kind of me looking forward, like looking forward to a dream. And it's kind of has the characters of the little boy, but I think that little boy is just me, and looking ahead to dreams. And And the second verse, she spends her days up in the North Park. North Park is actually a mall in Jackson, Mississippi that I used to go visit a lot. And people just like to spend their time looking at people in the mall, kind of people watching and stuff. And it was just kind of wrote about the sentiment of a lady watching people as they passed. And I think, but we all have those dreams. And it's interesting and fun to look out and sing that song and see people sing that song with their own dreams in their eyes. They're not necessarily looking at me thinking that wishing they could be like, I don't take it as they like not to be like it, because they're just looking. You see them, they might be singing toward me, but I see the dream that they're dreaming about being in their eyes, and it's so cool to get to see that,
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, so that album is, blows up, and you guys are, household names at that point. But a lot of bands can't follow it up. They're that one album hit and then they can't follow. But you guys did, because Away from the Sun was pretty darn big too. And I know, answer me this question. That the two big hits off of that, Here Without You and When I'm Gone, is there like a through line there? I almost noticed you're singing I'm here without you, baby, but you're on my mind. And then it's hold me when I'm here, but love me when I'm gone. Is that like you're finally out touring the road, but you're still talking to your lover who's, back home?
Absolutely.
Or, it seems like there's like a common thread with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like they say, you have your whole life to write your first record. You have like a year to write your second one. And that is a very recurrent theme on the Way from the Sun. Is you can tell it's like, well, he wrote those lyrics on a tour bus.
So that was you that was you on the tour bus writing basically back home saying I'm here without you and please love me when I'm gone.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the line in Here Without You, it says 100 days have made me older since the last time I saw your pretty face. Because that was based on the longest time I ever went on tour without going home was 3 months, and that was like 100 days. And that was a freaking long time, man. We left and we would go on that Better Life tour. We played probably the first 3 years of our career, so that was part of the Away from the Sun tour too. We probably played 300 shows a year, man. And not only did we play 300 shows a year, I'll bet you we visited 200 radio stations, because you'd play a show and then you'd get up in the morning and be at a radio station at 7:00 to go in and do an interview and play acoustic, and man, really, I mean, what time did you go to bed? I mean, and
right.
it was a lot. It's to look back on it, it's blurry, but it was a whirlwind and it was so exciting. And I thank God that I got to do it when I was so young, because I mean, I'm 42 now, and a lot of bands, they don't really like take off till like 35. There ain't no way under God's sun that I could have did that now. I could. I mean, dude, I'm healthier now and I feel better now. But at the same time, there's a difference in a 42-year-old and a 21-year-old.
Oh yeah, you have a lot more energy and stamina when you're younger, man. Your youth is built to be touring like that. When we get up late 30s, early 40s, man, you slow down a little bit.
Man, back in those days, and I'm not glorifying drinking in any way, because I don't drink anymore. I've been sober for 5 years. It's the best thing I ever done. But
well,
like
congrats.
3:00, thank you very much. Back in the day at 3:00, I was taking a shot of Jack Daniels. Now 3:00 in the daytime, I'm like, not time for the nap.
You were 3 shots down.
Oh, absolutely, man. Now I'm like, now I'm 3 pillows down.
Yeah, exactly. That's the natural evolution, my friend. Well,
Amen.
we could go through a million of your songs. We don't have time, but just one more in closing. I know everyone remembers Citizen Soldier. It was like your tribute. It was a recruitment video for the National Guard. And I remember, it was on TV, and it might have even played before, like sort of like before movie trailers, I think, if I remember correctly. But talk about why that was so important to you, the whole military call.
Yeah, man, that was actually a really fun project. And the National Guard wanted us to write a song that they could play in the movie theaters. And so the project came together with us knowing what it was going to be. It didn't just like happen to fit or whatever. And so the National Guard approached us to write a song that they could use for that thing. And then it was going to be shot around it. And so a man called me from the National Guard one day, and I can't remember what rank he was. Honestly, he was far up. I don't remember what it was, and I don't want to get it wrong. And he just kind of went through it with me and said, we'd like to have a song that kind of talks about, our National Guard being our first soldiers, going back to the Minutemen and fighting through all the wars and things. But not only showing the wars that they've been a part of, but what they do here at home as well. And he's got to talking about it. He said, and we call ourselves the citizen soldiers. So if you could incorporate that into the song somehow, and maybe somewhere in the lyrics, I was like, no, sir, I said, that's the song. Citizen Soldier will be the name of it. He said, well, that would be great. I said, yes, sir. And he said, if you could have it wrote for us, maybe within the next month sometime, that would be great too. That way we can go ahead and kind of start writing a video around it, getting it done. I said, I'll try my best. And I called him back about 2 hours later and said, got it. and we kind of laid it down that day at because we were in the process of making a record at the time anyway. And we laid it down that day and sent it to them. They were like, perfect, record it. We recorded it. And Antoine Fuqua, who's freaking one of the best directors ever.
Oh, Training Day.
Yeah. And he was so freaking cool, man. That dude, he was just like the coolest dude. And he was great to work with, but he had an eye for that, because I've never been around like really many like movie productions and stuff, but I've been around some pretty good directors, because we've had some directors that have directed videos for us go on to be pretty decent directors and pretty good directors in their own right. But they're not Antoine Fuqua, and he was already Antoine Fuqua when he directed this video, And so to see his eye go and like how he set up those shots, and that was a huge video shoot and all, and it was just really a cool project to be a part of.
Well, he at that point he was he had a little of that Denzel Washington magic still rub off on him, man.
Heck yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, I appreciate. Thanks for doing that song. Our listeners, we're in DC. We got Republicans and Democrats, and I know any given war, people will oppose or support depending on the policy. But regardless of where our listeners stand, you have to support the actual troops, because they and their families make such a big sacrifice. So thanks.
Absolutely, man. That is our absolute pleasure. It's our pleasure to do anything with the military anytime we can. My dad was in the Air Force. My brother was. And Chris, our guitar player, was 8 years in the Navy before he was in the band. And so we have ties to it. But, I never served. And, that's the least we can do is to support them. And that's my way of serving them is to be able to do things like that and to remember them whenever we can and to keep them in our prayers.
Perfect place to leave it. All right, everybody, again, Three Doors Down performing with special guest Seether at MECU Pavilion in Baltimore on Friday, August 20th. So get your tickets now. Thanks so much for doing this. Brad Arnold on WTOP. Thanks, man.
My pleasure, Jason.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.